Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8. We are really climbing up there of Silver Screen Anomalies. I'm Hallie.
And I'm Skyler.
In case you didn't know who we were by now.
You should.
You really should. Unless you're new, in which case, welcome. This is a podcast that is not spoiler-free.
Nope.
We talk about movies.
Exclusively movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Hallie said, this isn't spoiler-free, so if you are looking for spoilers or you've seen the movies that we're about to talk about...
you're in the right place.
You're in the right place. Otherwise, you should probably leave.
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Quick.
Or stay if you want. I don't care.
I mean, it depends how much you care about spoilers, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah.
We do occasionally have some salty language.
We do. I always mark these as explicit, even if we don't swear in the episode, just in case.
Yeah.
You know.
Because you never know.
You never know.
Maritimers, am I right?
That's us. So,
all right.
You know what? I was thinking about it this morning, and this has kind of been the year for Stephen King.
It really has been.
Like, really, though.
Like, more so than other years, because I know this has obviously been something that's been building and building over time with the resurgence of 80s sort of inspired content, like thanks to Stranger Things. And I mean, Stephen King has always been a presence in the media, but not to this extent where his properties and his source material are being adapted in a very high production sense to such a degree that they're big blockbusters.
Oh, yeah. Major blockbusters. And I mean, we've covered 2 already this year, 3 technically.
Yeah, it's true.
We covered, It Chapter 1 and 2 and Pet Sematary.
Yep.
And now we're going to cover some more Stephen King.
We're going to be returning to the Overlook Hotel for this episode.
We sure are, which means we are starting with Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep is a 2019 sequel to the 1980 film The Shining, and a direct sequel to the source material written by Stephen King. It's directed by Mike Flanagan. Dan Torrance struggles with alcoholism as a coping mechanism for dealing with a traumatizing event at the Overlook Hotel when he was a child. His search for solitude is interrupted by young Abra, a child that shares the same extrasensory ability to shine that Danny has. Together, they must battle the True Knot, a cult of energy shine-sucking vampires. That's right, those are words that I strung together into one sentence. All while keeping the ghosts of the Overlook Hotel at bay. So, Hallie, this is going to be a fun one to talk about. This was actually on my list, my personal list of my most anticipated movies of the year, mostly because of my personal attachment to The Shining specifically. What was your take on Dr. Sleep?
I really fucking like this movie.
Oh my god.
That's right. So obviously that explicit content tag was useful this episode.
Dropped the F-bomb.
Sure fucking did.
Oh my god.
It was a good movie.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it thoroughly.
It is terrific.
It is.
I also really enjoyed this movie, and I thought it was a pretty spectacular sequel to The Shining in just about every sense. There's not too much I actually don't like about this movie because it kind of handled the material in every capacity that I was expecting. Like, it checked a lot of boxes that I was looking for, and then some that I was surprised to check. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, I had very few hang-ups with this movie. Most of them were just little things. Mm-hmm. I can't think of anything major off the top of my head that I was like, oh man, this ruined the movie for me. Nothing ruined this movie for me.
Well, why don't we start by just diving right into the general plot of the film. So, like, obviously the synopsis kind of does a little bit of service to that, but there's a lot of extra stuff going on here. I think the thing to discuss first is the fact that this is a sequel to The Shining, and it wears that like a badge of honor. Mm-hmm. And there is a elephant in the room in regards to The Shining, where the original film from 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick, is something that is to me personally, that movie's a masterpiece. It's a work of art, and it is very different than the Stephen King source material. And infamously, it has caused a divide and ripple amongst fans where there are some people out there who only love the movie. There are people out there who vehemently hate the movie because it's so different. And one of those people is Stephen King. Yeah, he's not a fan.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah, Kubrick took some pretty serious liberties with the source material and made something wholly unique. And this kind of brings up a discussion about adapting source material that I think is really interesting to talk about on this podcast, which is, in my own personal opinion, I love that The Shining is different than its original source material, because when I go in to see an adaptation, I want an adaptation. I don't want a remake. I don't want to see the same thing that I already saw in my head while I was reading the book. I want to see someone else's perception of that story. And Kubrick managed to make something that stands on its own 2 feet while separating itself from King.
I was not a huge fan of the movie The Shining, and I only got halfway through the book, more just because of a short attention span than anything else. I think that the movie didn't impact me as much because I saw it when I was in university, and I saw it with friends. And anyone who watches movies with friends who've seen the movie may know that your friends might make some comments, might make some cracks, and there was one scene in particular that could have been really tense that was ruined by my friend, and I can't stop laughing about it to this day, where basically in The Shining, the 1980 version, when they're running out into the snow, and there's the snow cat out there, my buddy walked into the living room at that moment, looked on the screen, saw what was happening, and went, "I'm a snow cat, meow meow, get inside me, right meow." And I just cracked up laughing because it was so tense a moment that it just caught me completely off guard. Plus, you know, there are iconic moments from The Shining that have been used in various different media sources. The Simpsons did a take on The Shining. There have been some other ones. And so there are certain scenes that I can't look at without going, oh, yeah, that's strange. Usually the blood gets off at the second floor.
I mean, that's totally fair. And it sounds like your experience was tainted, which is a shame because...
I mean, I still enjoyed it, but it
Sure.
wasn't like as much of an impact as maybe it had on you when you saw it.
I think it's a fucking masterpiece.
So definitely not the same impact.
Not at all. The Shining is not only what I would consider to be probably one of the greatest achievements in horror in modern cinema, but it's also it's the standard. I compare everything to it. Like in terms of like atmosphere, tension, suspense, building and mounting, claustrophobic, just it gives you everything that you want out of a horror film because it follows the rule set of it's not showing you everything. It's letting your imagination fill in the gaps and details. And it uses a set that is so meticulously crafted to set up a scare. It's using this huge environment to create this air of like claustrophobia. You feel the walls coming in on you, and there's nothing about this hotel that feels normal or natural to such a degree that they specifically built the hotel to actually be almost like a labyrinth. That's no mistake at all that there's a literal maze in the film, like a hedge maze. It's very much a personification of the hotel itself where nothing makes sense. There are rooms in the hotel that shouldn't be there. There are windows that exist where windows shouldn't exist. The whole hotel has this like sort of like air of just unsettling mystery where like even the rug, like the infamous like patterned rug that you see that Danny is which we'll get more into Danny obviously when we discuss Dr. Sleep, but like the rug, the pattern on the rug is they shifted and moved it around throughout the process of making this movie on purpose to give you this sense of just like, hey, wait, what? Like there's an unsettling nature to like a living nature to the hotel. It feels alive, and very few movies capture that essence of just pure dread better than The Shining, in my opinion.
I really want you to see The Changeling.
I need to. You really do. To check this
and
out.
For anyone who's curious about The Changeling, our buddy Hunter, who is the host of North of Normal, has a podcast episode on it. Episode 2. You can go listen to it. He and I did that episode.
It's a great episode.
It's a great episode. Check out North of Normal. It's cool. All right.
So
Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep. So
All right.
Now that we got our opinions on The Shining out of the way, so everyone has a little bit of a sense of like where we're coming in and entering into this film. Like I'm approaching it from a very like high place of optimism, and Hallie from a place of like
I'm familiar with the source, like The Shining. I'm familiar with it, but I am treating this as like a sequel.
Yeah.
To the movie.
The thing that impressed me the most about Dr. Sleep is just how well it stands on its own 2 feet.
Oh, yeah.
Like barring a couple of exceptions, this movie is something you could go into and totally understand because of just amazingly structured writing.
The writing in this was so solid.
Yeah.
Absolutely solid.
You could go into this without knowing anything about The Shining and totally understand what's happening. And like, I have some lab test subjects to prove that, because we went with a group to see this movie, and there were some people that went into this who not only never saw The Shining before, but also weren't even really horror fans and actually had a pretty good time.
Yeah.
It functions very much for 3/4 of the film almost as like a science fiction suspense thriller mystery with some supernatural elements. It doesn't really play out like a horror film at all until the third act.
Yeah. So one of the things, I took very few issues with this film in terms of the writing, because like I said, this is a solid narrative. It's about Danny kind of getting his life back together and then being confronted with his past and needing to help Abra. That is one of the few things I had an issue with in this film. Is not that part. It's the name Abra.
Oh, for God's sakes.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
It wasn't a huge deterrent for me.
It's a little on the nose.
One of our friends, Taylor, who we went to the film with, said, they could have just called her Abby until the end of the film and then said it's Abra. That would have worked better for me. Otherwise, it's just kind of putting a hat on hat. It's like, magic.
I guess so, but
it's a
really
small hang-up.
Yeah.
And that's all I really have for this film are really small hang-ups.
The point that I want to make on a negative scale with this thing is very much just the runtime and the tonal shifts. There is a little bit of it's not jumbled. It's still well structured, but I do feel like there's a pacing issue with the movie where it really latches and digs its hooks into you. And something that it does excellently is that it keeps you on your toes. I had no idea what was going to happen around every turn because there's so many switches and character, basically the characters gaining
the upper hand.
Dominance over one another. There's a shift partway through the movie where one of my favorite scenes, and it's actually a callback to a movie we're also covering on this podcast. There's a callback to Gerald's Game. So I should point out Mike Flanagan, the director, is a big part of the reason why my fears of this sequel being successful were basically nil. I had no doubt in my mind at all that this was going to be great, because everything this guy has done is just terrific. He's a splendid director, and obviously is a huge Stephen King fan, because I'm going to start nerding out about Dr. Sleep later on, where I'm going to dive a little bit into some of the things I noticed that as a fan of the book and The Shining, there's all kinds of tiny little sprinkles of wonderful Easter eggs in this thing. But Mike Flanagan directs a scene where Abra is being basically pursued by Rose the Hat. And Rose the Hat is the main antagonist of this film. And I have to say, you and I are going to gush about the True Knot, because the True Knot, and as far as a villain as an entity, they're some of my favorites of the year. And I'm going to explain thoroughly why they're so effective as villains shortly. But Rose the Hat pursues Abra and gets inside her head in her bedroom while she's sleeping, and Abra sets a trap for her. And the way that this is constructed leads to a pretty gruesome scene where Rose the Hat's hand gets quite dismembered.
Yeah, caught in a drawer.
Yeah.
And this drawer represents her memories, Abra's memories. And the trap is sprung and the drawer slams shut on her hand, on Rose's hand, and it is
horrific.
It is gross.
This film focuses an awful lot on the basically boxing up your past into the literal boxes in your mind, trapping things and keeping them at bay, basically binding things up. Dan Torrance himself is a character that has shielded himself and his memories with alcoholism. He's basically become his father, and he's battling with that and trying to be a better man and a different person. He's almost he's kind of like a reformed alcoholic that's trying to very much make a positive impact on the world. And he was on that path long before he even really encountered Abra and the True Knot.
Yeah.
Which is something I really commend the film for doing, is that it builds Dan Torrance up as a character all over again, and we understand him completely. There's not one character in this movie we don't empathize with and understand, including the villains.
Well, I didn't empathize with the villains, but I love them. I thought they were fantastic.
Well, empathize is maybe a stronger word. It's more, I understand them.
I understand their motivations, which is really what you want in a villain.
They're horrible. Like, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
They
are child killers, and that is...
not okay.
Not okay.
Yeah.
I don't think my mom would like this movie. She lost her taste for Stephen King when he started killing his kids.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
This movie, like many Stephen King properties, is mean to kids. And one specific scene, which I think is the most disturbing scene I've seen all year.
It was real uncomfortable to watch.
It was really hard for me to watch.
Where the True Knot have captured a child, and then we get to watch him get killed. And his steam, which I thought was an interesting term for that, get devoured by the True Knot.
They basically feed off of pain. And
fear,
the shine,
I think.
The shine is basically exhaled out of their victims through pain and fear. And that's when it becomes the most potent. So they basically hover around them like vultures and inhale their shine, which gives them basically prolonged life. So this is where not so much the empathizing comes in, but you understand the villain's motivation, where they are approaching this from the angle of they're trying to exist. They're not too dissimilar than wolves hunting prey.
Yeah.
They are doing this to survive. So that level of motivation, and also the humanistic element of like, they're terrified to die as well. Mm-hmm. Like a lot, they have a fear of dying, like many do. And that's actually a common theme that runs through the movie, is this acceptance of one's past and an acceptance of one's end. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a running theme in this film that really, really punctuates. And it's actually quite emotional. Like, Mike Flanagan has a way of directing his horror so that he actually exhales this emotional resonance. Like, it feels like he's really capitalizing off of the horror in a profound way. Like, he's not just focusing on scares. He's focusing on giving you an experience. And that's something that I think really worked for this. Yeah, so the True Knot contribute to one of the most disturbing scenes I've seen all year. That sequence was not okay. They basically hold down and kill a kid. Yep. And it's not actually... the reason it's hard to watch is because they use the horror effectively, where you see just enough. Mm-hmm. They don't show it. It's not graphic. They don't show too much. There is blood. But they show enough that your brain does the rest of the work, and it is just upsetting. And it also makes you recall a scene earlier in the film, in fact, the opening, where a little girl is by the riverside, and they lure in a little girl. And the scene is so well directed, where, like, Rose the Hat lures them in. And she has this, like, demeanor about herself. Like, Rebecca Ferguson is one of the best things in this. She has a presence that is just so confident, warm, and kind, in a very deceptive way. There's something really off about her, and the way she carries this villain, like, there's this, like, really unprecedented confidence.
Yeah, it's very much a Venus flytrap she's got going on.
That's right. And the way that sequence is directed is so well handled, because it's basically like you have this little girl who is about to become a victim, and we have no idea as an audience at this point what actually happens to their victims. But, like, slowly it's revealed that the True Knot are just one by one showing up in the forest, and they basically pounce in on her and swarm her like vultures. And later on you find out exactly what they do, and then suddenly it makes you recall that sequence with the little girl and makes you feel sick.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth noting that they've been doing this for thousands of years, probably. Some of them. Yeah. It was really well crafted, the whole thing.
The whole thing. And there's a lot, I guess there's an error of this discussion where we're obviously like, these are a lot of new thematic elements that were not introduced into The Shining at all. These are things that expand your knowledge base of The Shining, like the True Knot and these energy vampires, and even the nature of The Shine itself. Like Dan Torrance and Dick Halloran, who makes an appearance in this movie as a ghost.
Yeah.
They are the only two people that are represented as having this sort of mystical power, this like extrasensory ability. We didn't know that there are different levels of this ability and different forms of this ability until the story presents itself.
Yeah, this was definitely expanding on the lore of the Shining universe, which is really cool. And actually kind of makes me want to see more.
Me too.
Stephen King has now opened up the lore book, and I want to know what other chapters there are in it.
I want more. Yeah, like this is...
More lore.
Yeah, we're big fans of like folklore and expanding and world building upon source material. So adding this level of detail and structure to The Shining was something that I was really pleased about when I read the book and then subsequently saw it presented and adapted into this movie. Ewan McGregor's performance is great.
So good.
Not surprising at all. He's great in everything, but he channels something in Dan that there's still a little bit of that child in him, but very much so he is so eagerly fighting to not be his father.
Yeah, you can definitely feel in his performance the duality. There is the Dan he was trying not to be his father now, but still that little tendril of Jack.
Yes.
Still lingering in the back.
The supporting cast too, like everyone in this is just completely balanced. Like I loved, oh my God, I'm going to butcher her name, but Kylie Curran, she's the young actress who played Abra.
Loved her.
She's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like
I loved,
good Lord.
You mentioned it earlier and I absolutely adored how the power, like the dominance in this movie was constantly switching.
It's always shifting.
Because if you were to look at it from a narrative perspective, having Abra, who isn't as familiar with the ins and outs, versus all these vampires, essentially psychic vampires who have been alive for centuries, know how to use the shine, how to hunt it down. And Abra's new to the shine, newish to the shine, but there's never the True Knot have the upper hand entirely. It's Abra has the upper hand just as much. And I love that shifting power. That makes it more engaging.
Yes.
Because it's like, what's going to happen next?
The game of cat and mouse is presented impeccably in this.
And she did an amazing job.
Yes. Oh my goodness. She's completely capable on her own. Like, obviously, like the dynamic between her and Ewan McGregor's portrayal of Dan Torrance, their little buddy cop partnership thing is awesome.
It's so fantastic.
It's so good. Like they play off of each other so well, and there's a genuine chemistry between the two of them. Like she calls him Uncle, which is kind of sweet, as a cover story for basically an adult sitting on a park bench with a young child. Like obviously they're spending a lot of time together and they needed a cover story, but there's like a sweetness there. Like they're like best friends.
Yeah.
And it's kind of awesome.
Because
like
they have a bond.
They have a bond. So some other little sprinklings of little Easter eggy things that I thought were kind of fun. So I mentioned earlier that Dick Hallorann makes an appearance as a ghost in this. It should be noted that Dick Hallorann, as a character in the book, survives The Shining while he takes an axe to the chest in the film. So his involvement is interesting in this, and it actually winds up being written in there very intelligently, where in the climax, basically Dan Torrance mirrors Dick Hallorann's presence as a ghost, but we'll get into that later. Another little Easter egg that I thought was actually kind of fun, Mike Flanagan is guilty in the best possible way of nepotism, where he uses a lot of the same cast in his movies.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, all of his movies have little sprinklings of people that he loves working with, including his own wife, who's not in this, but that's fine. There's the inclusion of one actress in particular, which he's never used before, but I was really pleased to see this. Another horror director that kind of came onto the playing board here around the same time as Mike Flanagan was Ty West, who directed a film called House of the Devil. House of the Devil has an actress, the lead actress of that film plays a babysitter who is being invaded by a cult in this house. And that actress plays Abra's mom in this movie, which I thought was really, really cool. And then there's tons of little ads sprinkled everywhere for looking for a babysitter, which I thought was a nice little tiny little callback to that. The biggest change between, and this is something we're both going to obviously really hit the nail on the head because it's the actual horror movie of Dr. Sleep. The biggest change in the book and the film is that at the end of The Shining in the book, the Overlook Hotel is destroyed. It's burned down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You can tell I never made it that far.
Yeah, so they actually, the climax of the book of Dr. Sleep takes place in the ruins of the Overlook Hotel.
All right.
And they actually do a really good job of balancing both the film and the book's approach to handling that hotel in this movie by keeping it intact, because it doesn't King even goes into lengthy detail describing how the movie ends in ice and his book ends in fire. the boiler room is used to destroy the hotel in The Shining, and they do that very much in this, where it's Dan Torrance who goes immediately to the boiler room and starts setting that up as like an explosive.
Yeah.
Which is, I thought, brilliant.
I thought that actually was the best way to end it.
Totally.
I mean, I was sad that Dan cacked it in the end. I was sad he died.
Me too.
But
it was necessary, I think.
It works. I mean, it didn't damage the story. It made total sense because now he's become the kind of spiritual advisor to Abra.
Yeah, very much how Dick Halloran was the spiritual advisor to him.
Exactly. And it also ends the Overlook, sort of. It is implied that the ghosts that Dan had spent years putting in boxes in his mind, lock boxes, are free again. And now Abra is going to lock them all away. But it ends the Overlook, which I think is fantastic. That's the only way you can do it.
It's a beautiful way to end that story. Yeah. And also closing the book on Dan Torrance embracing the spirit of his mom.
Yeah, that was really
so
sweet.
Emotionally handled and so beautiful because like the actress who played his mom, good Lord, she channeled Shelley Duvall amazingly.
Oh yeah, really well done.
Really hit those high notes, those like really sort of like high energy, sort of manic sort of like that sort of manic sort of approach to the way that she handled that performance, but mostly because Stanley Kubrick drove her nuts on set, obviously. But
what a surprise!
What a surprise!
Director.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
the climax of this movie is brilliant, and it's gonna work for I think most people. Some people are gonna find it a little. This is where you can get into some negatives, depending on how you want to handle this. Personally, I loved it. You could chalk the third act of this movie up to fan service because it is literally replicating shots of Kubrick's The Shining almost down to a T with just beautiful cinematography, and the recreations of these shots are gorgeous. Like they're so good, like right down to the typewriter, which I had chills the entire time they were in that hotel. Like from the very second they pulled up to entering into the doors, like I was just riveted.
Yeah, as soon as they entered the Overlook, even though it looks haunting and, you know, obviously abandoned from the outside, when Dan steps in, the lights start to turn on one by one as he approaches them.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant because it gives a total feeling that though the hotel is abandoned, it's not empty.
It's dormant.
It's waking up. And that's how they describe it in the film, is they're waking up the hotel. And I think that's brilliant.
It's so good.
And the atmosphere in that place was just fantastic.
The confrontation between obviously Abra, Dan, and Rose the Hat in this hotel is some of the most exciting stuff I've seen all year in cinema. It really played super well to the fan of The Shining that I am, and also just a horror fan. It was riveting. It was well constructed, and even though it plays out kind of the way that you expect it to, there's some little twists and turns, and again that power dynamic shifts so constant. Like you have no idea who's going to get the upper hand at any point.
No.
It's just well constructed, well written, and beautifully executed stuff. Like this movie just on all cylinders just worked for me.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed it.
I think the only thing that was a little annoying to me was just the constant traveling. That was a little annoying, and especially since I'm not sure that the timing all lined up okay, but
there were some time stamping issues where like the beginning of the movie especially was guilty of this, where it was jumping around a lot, which kind of plays into my one negative, which was like the pacing was weird.
The pacing was a little bit strange.
It's 2.5 hours long, and
probably could have shaved another 20 minutes off that somewhere.
Yeah, and you know what though, like if you read the book, because this was something I was really concerned about, is like the book is really fucking weird, and I was kind of concerned about this because there's so much travel in the book as well. Like they jump around from place to place to place. So I was kind of wondering how they were going to juggle that in the movie. And I think he did the best that he possibly could.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, the pacing was a little bit strange, and the constant, this location, this time was a little annoying. But again, I say, I really enjoyed this film. I did not have a whole lot of issues with this. No. Even with the small issues I did, it never broke it for me.
No, not at all. It's super well done. Do we want to do numbers on this thing?
Let's do numbers on this thing.
Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I'll start this one. All right. So Dr. Sleep. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10 because I enjoyed this film a whole lot. And I think it stands on its own as much as it does a sequel.
I'm going to have to completely agree with you on this one. I'm also giving this movie a 9 out of 10.
Sweet.
We matched up, which is cool. I think this film does everything that I was looking for as far as the sequel goes to The Shining. And it does the most triumphant thing in somehow effortlessly blending both the Shining book. It pays homage to the original source material by Stephen King, and also manages to pay homage to Stanley Kubrick. It actually is a love letter to both at the same time without being offensive to one or the other. Like, I feel like this is something that structurally will work for just about anybody, even people who aren't really into horror. That's what's kind of great about it, is that it's very genre bending. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
For sure. Awesome. So let's head over to the next one. What'd you think of that fancy sound effect?
Pretty cool.
Yeah, we're getting fancy up in here.
Very fancy.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about the next film. Also Stephen King. Also Mike Flanagan.
What a shock.
What a shock.
Also a film about dealing with your past trauma.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yep. Yeah. So our next film is Gerald's Game, which is a Netflix film directed by Mike Flanagan from 2017. After attempting to make things extra spicy in the bedroom, a couple goes through a traumatic event resulting in the husband dying unexpectedly. Now strapped to the bedpost, Jessie must escape captivity while also doing battle with her own past trauma. So Hallie, I may have set you up for disaster here. So I'm going to preface this by saying we were trying to find a film that we could pair with Dr. Sleep. And my immediate response was Gerald's Game. Gerald's, for a number of reasons. Obviously, there's the tie to Stephen King, there's the director, Mike Flanagan, and also just the subject matter itself, where it is very much about the psychological aspects of dealing with one's own trauma and accepting one's own trauma. It deals with this particular kind of storytelling in a much heavier manner than Dr. Sleep. Dr. Sleep plays itself out very much like a blockbuster event picture in a lot of ways. While this very much is a smaller, contained, isolated look at a very specific kind of trauma. So Hallie, I may or may not have baited you into something that might not have sit well.
Maybe.
Yeah. So we're going to be on polar opposite ends of the fence on this one, I feel like.
Maybe. We're going to find out.
We're going to find out. By comparison to Dr. Sleep, where we were literally on the same page.
Totally same page.
This is going to be different. So why don't you start with your thoughts on Gerald's Game?
Thoughts on Gerald's Game. Well, I saw the trailer for this when it came out in 2017. And I saw the trailer and I went, nah, I'm good. But then you were like, oh, it's really good. And I was like, okay, I'll watch it. And then we needed it for the podcast. So I was like, all right, well, I have to watch it now. So... Technically, I enjoyed it. I thought that the methodology of dealing with trauma and grief was portrayed interestingly here. So, I mean, you've got a couple trying to make things work. Nothing's working. They end up going to the cabin for the weekend to have a sexy, romantic weekend together. Get a little bondage going on in there. Handcuff a girl to a bed. And the husband wants to play out what comes across as very much a rape fantasy. And then he cacks it. I like that word now, cacks it. He's in the other one too, yeah. He dies, heart attack or whatever. And you have a scantily clad female cuffed to a bed for the duration of the movie. But what I liked about it was the visions that she has.
Yes.
Which is her way of dealing with the situation. You know, her husband comes back as a ghost or a manifestation, let's call it that.
Yes.
And also a version of herself, a confident, capable version of herself also. So you've got this little three-way conversation going for chunks of the movie, mixed in with memories and analyzing her life while she's trying to survive and get out of the situation that she's in, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah. It's the best stuff in the movie.
Absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it was really a really cool technique.
Yep.
Introduced some very interesting characters. The Moonlight Man.
The Moonlight Man is excellent.
The Moonlight Man is very, very excellent.
A very Stephen King type character that she gets basically visited by this very tall, gaunt, sort of almost Nosferatu inspired character.
Yeah.
That she first very much thinks of as a vision of sorts, or
of
something
death.
that's
it's supposed to, he represents death.
Yes.
Like he's coming for her. And I love the effect that was done with his eyes.
Oh yeah. Totally. It's menacing, it's scary.
And it links to her past too.
That's right.
Which we'll get into.
The use of the color red specifically is a direct memory tie to her past, which I get the impression it's this particular angle of the film that really rubbed you the wrong way.
So here's what rubbed me the wrong way about Gerald's Game. I'm tired of seeing women in the victim position.
Mm-hmm.
I am tired of seeing them handcuffed and scantily clad and basically open to all sorts of horrible things. Not to mention her childhood trauma, which, spoiler warning, and trigger warnings too for anybody who's sensitive to this. Her father sexually, it's stressed that he never touched her, but he basically masturbated to her.
Yes.
While she was on his lap.
Yeah, which is disgusting.
Which is absolutely abhorrent and disgusting. I think, in my honest opinion, I would have enjoyed this movie a whole lot more if it had been gender bent. If it had been that it was a man who was handcuffed and it was a woman who had this fantasy and it was a man who was dealing with this trauma and this, because it happens and it never really comes up in cinema.
Yeah, it never gets talked about.
In media.
Yeah.
But men are easily as capable of being victims as we are, as females are. And I would have loved to have seen a version where that was not the case.
I really think that that's a terrific point to make about this, because I like this movie a lot more than you do.
It's true.
I do think that this is pretty great. That being said, I was very close to not liking this movie as well, because it took me a while to watch this for the very same reasons that it took you a while, where all I saw in the trailer very tactfully dodges around all of the better elements of this film, where it's just focusing on sort of a character being bound. And I'm sick of seeing women bound.
I really am too.
And victimized as well. Why I love this movie and why it works for me is because I look at it askew, like a little bit differently than you do, perhaps, where, like, yes, it is about a woman who is bound and victimized and in captivity and has to escape, which we've seen in horror, in this genre specifically, a lot.
Yeah.
But the story, the heart of the story and the purpose of the film is very much about actually breaking free. It's breaking the shackles.
Absolutely.
It's about not just a woman, but a human being breaking free from their past trauma, accepting their trauma, and becoming a stronger person as a result of that. Right down to, like, the very triumphant ending, because the ending of this, I think, I may be wrong in this, I think is very different than the novella by Stephen King, and in which case I really love this ending because it is triumphant. She even confronts the Moonlight Man. Yeah,
which she's not sure if the Moonlight Man from the beginning, when she first sees him, is real or not. She's convinced he's not real.
Correct.
But it then turns out that, yes, he was real, a real person who was grave robbing and killing people and eating them and taking trinkets and souvenirs from these people that he killed and ate.
So he wasn't a vision at all.
He wasn't a vision at all.
Which is, I think, such a well-written and very visually terrifying image. Just to see this, like, gaunt, tall, horrifying, Grim Reaper-esque image at the end of a hallway in a house while you're strapped to a bed. Like, there's just really good uses of suspense and tension in this film. Mm-hmm. But to get back to my point about my reasons for liking it so much, it very much just ties to it being a character study. Something that I really like in cinema is really intelligent dissections of the human psyche. And this goes into a lot of detail, despite the fact that it is obviously initially from a catalyst standpoint anyway. Like, the catalyst of this movie is something we've seen a million times before to a point of nauseum. And you and I both, you know very well how I stand on, like, victimization of women. I'm tired of it. It's exhausting.
Victimization and exploitation. I'm kind of just...
Had this just have been a survival movie about a woman being strapped to a bed and having to escape, had that have been the only hang up about this entire experience, I would not have liked this. Because of the tactful approach of her seeing manifestations, ghosts or apparitions of this very hallucinatory experience while you're watching this, where you don't know what is real and what isn't, and it's so intrinsically connected to this character's past. Had it not have gone with that angle, I probably wouldn't have liked this either. No. But I wound up loving it because I was so enthralled by seeing this woman come to battle with her own psyche and overcoming it. It was the hero triumphing over a very oppressive villain, the greatest villain of all, ourselves.
Yeah. And I'll be totally honest, I hated this movie until those apparitions showed up.
Fair enough.
I did not like this movie at all until they added that element of the supernatural.
It throws a curveball.
It does. And that changed it. That's when I started getting engaged with the movie.
Well, seeing like Bruce Greenwood, who, again, going back to the nepotism comment about Mike Flanagan.
Yeah, there's quite a few familiar faces in this film.
Cara Gugino, which, by the way, she's amazing in this movie.
Fantastic. Like,
just incredible.
Because she's not playing one character. She's technically playing one character, two different versions.
That's right.
And she nailed both.
There's a full alumni cast from The Haunting of Hill House in this, which is wonderful.
And a little from Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, I was just going to say Bruce Greenwood, who was in Dr. Sleep, and I forgot to even mention that scene where he basically plays a complete mirror of the Jack Torrance scene from The Shining, where even the set looks identical. He makes an appearance in Dr. Sleep, which is great. And he has a moment to shine in this too, where he's playing this sort of disgusting husband figure with a rape fantasy, which all of that stuff made me super uncomfortable as well. Yeah, I don't have a strong affinity for the showcase of rape in cinema. I feel like it has no place or purpose in film, like unless you have something really intelligent to say, and even then you are walking on thin ice with me.
There are ways of conveying that something like that has happened without showing it, without putting it front and center.
And when you have something as traumatic as child sexual abuse, that's something that like you are really on thin ice with that.
For sure.
This movie uses visual imagery and colors to convey what has happened without going overboard. Flanagan never oversteps his hand. Like he never overplays it, which is something a good director should be able to do. He has restraint. Which I appreciate so much, because I think discussing these things in cinema is important.
Absolutely.
Like this is something that should be represented, but you need to represent it in a way that is tactful and intelligent and respectful. And I think this movie does. It never overdoes it. But it leaves you enough that it is disturbing. It leaves a lingering sting.
Yeah.
And that lingering sting is another reason why I thought it was effective. I really liked that it was a thought-provoking glimpse into some very heavy subject matter, and the character overcoming this subject matter is a big part of the reason why I loved it so much. Had the character have fell victim to her own psyche, I would not have liked this.
No. The ending made this movie enjoyable for me in that regard. The technicality I love. I love the structure and the method of dealing with these elements. It's just, I would have loved to have seen this gender bent.
I agree.
As something different.
It would have been cool,
important to discuss.
That's right. Like hey Hollywood. I know no one's listening from Hollywood.
No one's listening from Hollywood.
Maybe someday. This is a story we need to tell. To get the male perspective on victimization and sexual abuse. This is something you don't see very often. It's always from a female perspective, which I personally am also growing tired of. And this is just one exception where this movie is so well directed and so well written, and the performances are so great that like I couldn't help but be mesmerized by just how it dances around this lurid subject matter so intelligently. Like I really appreciated what this movie did. That being said, I would also love to see a gender bent version of this, like a story from the perspective of a man in captivity that is undergoing repressed sexual abuse. Yeah.
speaking to the set and the effects there, you mentioned earlier the use of color, and that's what kind of got me thinking about this. It's the use of red.
Yes.
So Jessie, the main character, her trauma from her childhood happened during a solar eclipse. And,
Which is a striking image.
A striking image that gets used in several places, most notably in the eyes of the Moonlight Man.
That's right.
Because you see he's got like the deep set eyes and everything, but the actual color, he's got these red halos in his eyes. And it's not until later that you realize it's the solar eclipse. It's hearkening back to her trauma.
It's a visual callback to the eclipse. And you see it again. And once she inevitably escapes, horrifically, mind you, and again, it goes back to that sequence that I broke down on Dr. Sleep with the hand being mangled.
Yeah, that was a bit unrealistic to me. I was thinking about, I was like, I don't know that it would. So basically, she cuts her wrist so that blood spills and she can slip her hand out, but then the skin from the cut gets torn up, and that was really disgusting. But I'm like, I don't know that that's how that would work.
I think it would.
Maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess. Yeah.
That makes tons of sense to me.
Maybe it was just that the effect was obviously CGI'd. I felt like it didn't look realistic.
I don't even know if that's true. Like, I think that was actually a practical effect.
Really? Because it did not look like it.
I would have to look this up to clarify.
But look that up and get back to me on that.
Because
I'd like to know.
It was quite horrifying.
It was disgusting and horrifying. Yes.
But in her escape, we also get a recollection of the color red. Her entire the sequence of her driving away is some of the most like ethereal, horrifying. Just the use of red, and this is just like suddenly red has become her world. Yeah. Where now she's fully embracing her past. Yeah. She has had to accept and embrace her past to escape. She did battle with her own psyche, and now she's the Moonlight Man is a stronger presence more now than ever. And her walking up to the Moonlight Man at the end and basically mocking him and walking away, I thought was just excellent.
It was an excellent sequence. Again, a little unrealistic. I feel like if you walk into a courtroom and you start shouting at the defendant, maybe somebody would approach you a little faster than nobody did.
It's a movie. Yeah,
I know, and I tried to suspend my disbelief, but it just didn't work for that final sequence.
Fair enough.
I mean, it was a good sequence and very powerful, standing up to her boogeyman, essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
But it didn't quite land.
It didn't land for you.
Didn't land for me. But, I mean, it was a really good sequence and a necessary one. I just felt like the reactions of everyone around her were not accurate.
I think in films, like, there are certain films where the implausibility of something will irk me and stand out like a sore thumb and actually pull me out of the sequence. It really depends on the subject matter and also whether the ends justify their means. And in this particular case, the ends justify their means. It was very much a triumphant just hurrah for this character. She overcame and did battle with her demons and won. And I love basically seeing a strong, independent woman overcoming her demons far exceeded and trumped every other ounce of oppression in the film. Basically, the stuff that would have bothered me in any other movie was trumped by the fact that I actually got to see a strong, empowered female character overcome her demons.
Yeah, and it always makes me feel good to see a movie like that, for sure.
That's how I view this film. There's a way that you can view it where you have to suffer through a woman dealing with oppression and her doing battle with a very lurid past. And then there's the other angle where you can look at it a little bit more positively. And I think that that's really going to be the hanging point of whether or not you like this or not. Because it is a tough pill to swallow, but on a craftsmanship level, it's undeniably well made. Very well acted, and definitely worth checking out if this is your bag, in my opinion.
Yes, I will say, if you have not seen this, you don't care about the spoilers or anything, be warned. It deals with some heavy stuff that could be triggers for certain people.
Agreed. So yes, definitely
all the stuff we basically mentioned already.
That's right. Let's do numbers.
Yeah. You can go first this time.
Cool. I love this movie. I think it's stylish. I think Mike Flanagan is one of the best working directors today, especially in horror. I think he has a real voice. We're starting, especially over the past 5 years, we've been getting like a resurgence of just like real gems in this genre, like in directing, and he's one of them. He has a real voice and a real style, and you really get a sense of that in Gerald's Game. I think this is the first movie where I really took notice of Mike Flanagan. I think if you're looking for something that uses a minimal cast and a minimal set effectively and is beautifully constructed and well acted, like everything that we've already said, personally, I think it's a triumph. I'm going to give this movie an 8.5 out of 10.
Right on. Well, this movie didn't land as well for me for all the reasons that I've already mentioned. I think I would have scored it a lot higher if they had switched some roles around. As it was kind of hard to sit through, especially that first bit. I hated. Once they introduced the more psychological, supernatural elements, I was more into it. I liked the ending. I thought it was a really solid ending and a necessary ending. I am going to give this a 6.5 out of 10. And the only reason I think I even went that high is because I do enjoy those technical aspects. I think, it's just the material that I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't get behind it.
That's fair. I think this is the first time we've been in this much opposition on the film. Yeah.
And it's actually been really interesting to hear your perspective on it.
I agree. I really liked hearing your angle of this. I was hoping you would have like an adverse reaction to this thing when I suggested it. Not because I was like really fishing to put you through agony with the movie.
No, I know.
But I really wanted your take, and more specifically, like I wanted a female perspective on the subject matter of this. And I think you bring up some really, really good points that I think are absolutely valid. Like it is very much a subjective experience. And I mean, it is entirely possible that other females will have a different reaction to this. Other women may think that this is very empowering. Yeah. It's about not letting your past hold you. And I could take that away from this movie as well. However, I would have preferred to see a different take on it. Yeah. I think that's it. Very fair. And I agree with everything you've said.
Yeah. And I think, to end this on a lighter note, this movie is a very, very good example of why a safe word is necessary when you're playing with handcuffs.
That's it.
Just so we can end it on a lighter note.
On a positive
note. Yeah. So that's episode 8 of Silver Screen Anomalies.
That was our very Stephen King, Mike Flanagan episode.
This has been our kind of year for the Stephen King movies, for sure.
This was a fun one. I think we really covered some good material here, and I hope the audience agrees.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any ideas for movies we can review or anything you want to see for Remake Rumble, you can reach out to us on our Facebook page or Instagram at eldritch.creative or Twitter at eldritchcreate. We also should mention Eldritch Creative is a year old now.
Holy crap.
Yeah, I know, right? Get the party hats on and celebrate. So
insert effect for celebratoriness.
I'll do that.
Here?
There. Did you like that?
Yeah.
I thought, it was really good.
Did you hear that effect, everyone?
That was great, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So thank you guys for listening, for supporting us, liking our posts, for sharing our stuff, maybe seeing Guardian, our short film, which is now on YouTube. Yeah,
we owed a debt of gratitude to all of our fans out there and supporters.
Yeah, and we've got some fun stuff coming. There is a bonus, I guess, at this point episode of Silver Screen that was supposed to come out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we apologize for that.
We're so sorry. It's taking us a little bit more time than we thought to get that together, but it is coming in the very near future. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.